complete hoax. She said, I'll tell you something, Susan. I served when I first got to the Senate on the committee that was responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration, talking about the Trump, Mike Pence has said in there, that the Trump-Pence administration took the word science off the website and then took the phrase climate change off the website. Why would they do that? The climate change has been changing every day, the climate has, since God created the planet. So why would you need climate change on the website? I mean, it's total propaganda, and President Trump and Mike Pence understand. Kamala Harris goes on to say, we have seen a pattern with this administration, the Trump-Pence administration, which is they don't believe in science. Well, that's not true, and nobody's ever said that. They don't believe in propaganda. They don't believe in scientists that are bought and paid for by the United Nations. They don't believe in that, because that's been proven to be false, everybody. But she said, and Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs. Donald Trump, when asked about the wildfires in California, and the question was, the science is telling us this, you know what Donald Trump said? Science doesn't know. Well, that's actually a true statement. And so it's all propaganda. If you're sitting there watching the debate, you think, well, you know, it's going pretty good. Mike's doing pretty good. And Kamala Harris has got, you know, they're just going back and forth. But there's so much more to it than that. Because we know the Bible prophesies a world government that will be established in the end time. This human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, it's this environmental crisis that they've come up with. That's straight from the United Nations, everybody. This world government, they've got to keep you in fear mode because they want more strings attached to you. They want to control you. So Kamala Harris goes on to say, so let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat, life-threatening to us as human beings. Joe Biden is about saying we're going to invest in renewable energy, which is going to be about the creation of millions of jobs. Really? It's going to be about about abolishing millions of jobs. Think about all the coal-fired power plants and different emissions, cars with that let off carbon emissions they're wanting to do away with. Think about all the jobs that's going to get rid of. She said we will achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Zero carbon emissions, everybody, by 2050. 30 years from now. And carbon neutral by 2035. She said Joe has a plan. And then she says this, we will re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement with pride. Joe Biden has said they'll do it on day one. Well, of course, you know the Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the socialistic blueprint by the world government, the United Nations, to run the world. They are twin efforts. The Sustainable Development Goals was not mentioned in the debate last night. The Paris Climate Agreement was, but they're twin efforts. They're designed specifically to govern the entire planet. It's a socialistic plan. They say without redistribution, it's not going to be possible. Wealth redistribution, which is the major plank of socialism. So one without the other is pointless. The Sustainable Development Goals, unanimously adopted by 193 members of the United Nations back in September of 2015. If you don't know what they are, you should study them. The United Nations, this global governing plan is called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. According to the United Nations' own website, these 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 targets demonstrate the scale and ambition of this new universal agenda. The Sustainable Development Goals are an effort by the United Nations to control every aspect of every person's life on the planet. One of the main areas of critical importance is the planet itself. According to this 2030 agenda, we are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources, taking urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. And this was the reason for the Paris Climate Agreement that they talked about last night in the debate. Without a commitment from every nation to curb their greenhouse emissions, it's impossible to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This is why, even though President Trump pulled us out, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris wanting to put us back into that because they're believers in world government. And they want to abide by this plan, this Sustainable Development Plan. So they want to put us back into that. Kamala Harris said, we will proudly enter the United States back into the Paris Climate Agreement. Again, what are we talking about here today? What kind of America do you want? Do you want an America that's lined up to the world governing body of the end time? I don't. But these are the things that are at stake in 26 days. And we've got to talk about them because this is from a biblical angle. This is a prophetic aspect. Think about all the prophecies that are converging right now. Think about who you want at the helm of this nation during that. Now, my trust is not in a man. Okay? Talking about the debate today. You're going to vote. We're all living through this. I live in the same world you do. So we're all going to vote, and it's the world we live in. It's what we need to do. But I trust in the Lord. If it matters to me who is elected, but my trust is in the Lord. So if Donald Trump gets it, we'll live with that. If Joe Biden gets it, we'll live with that. However, there are decisions I can make as a Christian man that I can say, hey, here's the kind of America I want to live in, and I can voice my opinion by my vote. That's what we'll do on November 3rd or whoever, if you vote early, whatever. But it's very important that you understand the issues. We're going to be talking about a lot more issues when we get back from the break. I got a little bit more on this Paris Climate Agreement because I want you to really understand, and then we're going to get into abortion, the Supreme Court, all kinds of things. So join me when we come back because there's a lot of things at stake coming up within the next 30-day window here. It's very important that we get it right.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
I have left a piece of my heart in Israel and her people. We would like to thank Endtime for doing such an awesome job with our Israel tour. We marvel at your team keeping the time schedule, keeping everyone comfortable, the wonderful driver, the brilliant guide, the entire tour program, good hotel choices, and stellar food. We had the privilege to rub shoulders with Pastor Baxter, listen to his current teachings, and had some interesting questions answered so eloquently. He is wonderful. Helene from Australia.
Experience the Holy Land in the most amazing way. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter for our upcoming Israel tour. For more information, go to endtime.com or call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
On January 28, 2016, during his opening remarks at the Abu Dhabi Action Day, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon made the following statement. He said, the Paris Climate Agreement was adopted just after the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and these are twin plans for transformative progress. Sustainable Development Goals are the vision. Climate change is the commitment by the nations. This vision and commitment should go hand in hand. They are part of our grand design. They should complement each other. If we don't implement the climate change agreement, all these 17 goals will not be fully implemented. Well, now you can understand the importance of Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. But Joe Biden and Kamala Harris advocate world government. That's why they want to push us back into that. Joe Biden's a globalist. That's easily proven. So, Susan Page, the moderator, says Senator Harris just said, looking at Mike Pence, Senator Harris just said the climate change is an existential threat. Vice President Pence, do you believe that climate change poses an existential threat? Mike Pence said, as I said, Susan, the climate's changing. We'll follow the science. You yourself said repeatedly, talking to Kamala Harris, that you would ban fracking. You were the first Senate co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, while Joe Biden denied the Green New Deal the other night. And so he said, thank you, Susan, but the Green New Deal is on their campaign website, and yet Joe Biden denied it during his debate with President Trump. And then Mike Pence said, and as USA Today said, it's essentially the same plan that Kamala Harris co-sponsored with AOC when she submitted it in the Senate. And as you just heard Kamala Harris say, that she's going to resubmit America to the Paris Climate Accord. We've made great progress reducing CO2 emissions through American innovation and the development of natural gas through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New Deal that would impose all new mandates on American businesses and American families. So, got through that one. Very important. You guys have got to understand that stuff because we're all going to deal with it should the Joe Biden-Harris campaign, that platform, get elected. So I want to talk a little bit more about world government and foreign policy here a little bit because they got off into that last night, and it's very important that we understand. Susan Page said, Senator Harris, we've seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years. Donald Trump basically has pulled us out of the world government in many ways. And she said, and of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What's your definition, Senator Harris, of the role of American leadership in 2020? Well, of course, Kamala Harris said, you look at our friends at NATO. President Trump's walked away from many agreements. You can look at the Iran nuclear deal, which has now put us in a position where we are less safe because they're building up what might end up being a significant nuclear arsenal. And she says, we were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends and allies around, she said the country, I think she meant around the world. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, rather than multilateral or world governing, she said, coupled with isolationism, even, the United States did sign the Declaration of Independence, right? Not the Declaration of Interdependence on foreign governments. She said, he pulled us out and has made America less safe. Well, you understand the JCPOA, right? The Iran nuclear deal. Ever since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran has become the world's #1 supporter of terrorism. Whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas down in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, the money trail always seems to go back to Iran. In Iran's political rallies, it's common to hear them chant, death to little Satan, or Israel, death to big Satan, the United States. They hate us. When it became obvious that Iran was moving towards obtaining a nuclear weapon, the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the United States, United Kingdom, Russia, France, and China, along with Germany, which those guys are called the P5+1, and Iran, they reached the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. Under the JCPOA, Iran agreed to eliminate its stockpile of medium-enriched uranium, cut its stockpile of low-enriched uranium by 98%, and reduce about 2/3 the number of its gas centrifuges for 13 years. There was a sunset clause. It was going to come to an end. The agreement provided that in return for verifiably abiding by its commitments, Iran would receive relief from the United States, European Union, and the United Nations Security Council, the nuclear-related sanctions. Well, when JCPOA was enacted and the sanctions were lifted, money began to just flow once again into Iran's coffers. The problem is, before long, Iran was, again, what do they do with the money they get? They don't give it to their people, right? They use it to fund terrorism, and that's exactly what happened around the globe, not just in the Middle East. So what has happened? President Trump says, I'm done with that. He withdraws from the JCPOA. Back in, May 2018, President Trump abandoned that Iranian nuclear deal, and he reinstated economic sanctions targeting both Iran and the states that would trade with it. And he mandated that nations and businesses who traded with Iran would not trade with the United States. Since the U.S. economy is, 50 times that of Iran, most of those nations chose to forsake Iran so they could maintain ties with America. And President Trump has put the Iranian government in an economic headlock, really is what it is, and the economy of Iran has been spiraling downward ever since. Well, Kamala Harris was saying it was a bad thing that we pulled out of that. Well, Mike Pence said, President Trump kept his word when this was his response to that, kept his word when he moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. When Joe Biden was vice president, they promised to do that. They never did. We stood strong with our allies, but we've been very demanding. NATO is now contributing more to our common defense than ever before, thanks to President Trump's leadership. We've strengthened our alliances across the Asia-Pacific, and we've stood strong against those who would do us harm. When President Trump came into office, ISIS captured an area in the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the caliphate and took down their leader, al-Baghdadi, without one American casualty. And al-Baghdadi obviously was responsible for the death of thousands. So he said, if we destroy the ISIS caliphate, and you talk about re-entering the Iran nuclear deal, Kamala Harris, the last administration transferred $1.8 billion to the leading state sponsor of terrorism. Think about that. And they're wanting to go back into that. It's really mind-boggling. So, that was world government. The United Nations was behind the JCPOA. President Trump said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. Pulled us out. Well, then you look at, that was climate change. That was the Iran nuclear deal. Now let's talk about the Supreme Court and abortion. Susan Page, the moderator, said the Supreme Court on Monday, the Supreme Court, the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to open hearings on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. Her confirmation would submit the court's conservative majority and make it likely open to more abortion restrictions, even to the point of overturning Roe v. Wade. Access to abortion would then end up back at the states. Vice President Pence, you're the former governor of Indiana. If Roe v. Wade was overturned, what would you want Indiana to do? Would you want your home state to ban all abortions? And so Mike Pence responded with this. Now, with regard to the Supreme Court, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, our hope is that the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh, that he received with treatment from you and others, he was talking to Kamala Harris, she was one of the leading railroaders against him, that we hope she gets a fair hearing. And we particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian faith that we saw before. He said, I mean, the Democrat chairman of the Judiciary Committee, when Judge talked about that, and he said when Judge Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals, they expressed concern that the dogma of her faith lived loudly and with her. And so he said, Senator Harris, Mike Pence is speaking, he said, I know one of our judicial nominees that you actually attacked because they were a member of the Catholic Knights of Columbus, just because the Knights of Columbus hold pro-life views. So the moderator, Susan Page, says, well, Senator Harris, let me ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to Vice President Pence. If Roe v. Wade was overturned, would you want California, what would you want them to do? Would you want your home state to enact no restrictions or access to abortion? Well, of course, Kamala Harris, she said, well, first of all, Joe Biden and I are both people of faith. In fact, Joe, if elected, will be the only second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. Now, we got to stop right here. Joe Biden, practicing Catholic, right? So I have a question for everybody. Can a person consider themselves a Christian and support abortion? Joe Biden claims to be a Catholic, right? Kamala just said it. According to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, their website, they state this, and I'm quoting, the Catechism of the Catholic Church states, since the first century, the Church has affirmed the moral evil of every procured abortion. This teaching has not changed and remains unchangeable. Direct abortion, that is to say abortion willed either as an end or a means, is gravely contrary to moral law. That's number 2271. So, if Joe Biden is a practicing Catholic, how can he be pro-abortion? Those two don't, I can't make that math work. Can you? It's a great question. So, Kamala Harris continues on and she says, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. Well, guess what, everybody? I actually agree with Kamala Harris. A woman should have the right to decide what she does with her body. I'm going to hold right here because I want to make sure you hear this. I agree with Kamala Harris on this point, and I want you to hear my afterthought from that. Why would I agree with her on this point? You say, are you pro-abortion? No. And I'm going to tell you why on the other side of the break. It's very important. It's a big issue right now.
Most of us walk around day by day blind to the prophecies being fulfilled right before us. Every news report brings a new piece to the puzzle in the race towards the final 7 years and the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, more than ever, it is important for God's people to understand the times in which we are living. On November the 12th, 2013, we opened our Jerusalem Prophecy College in downtown Jerusalem. These same courses are now available online for people who are unable to attend the classes in person. We welcome students to join us and discover the link between current events and the prophecies of the Bible. Take your place in the prophecy of Daniel 11:33. Enroll in the Jerusalem Prophecy College today. Go to JerusalemProphecyCollege.com.
So I agree with Kamala Harris. A woman should have the right to decide what she does with her body. However, unlike Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, I do not believe it is a woman's right to choose what to do with another human being's life, especially a life living inside of them. You say, well, that's the woman's body. There's another brain. There's another heartbeat. There's another living human being inside of them. It's a woman's right to do whatever they want with their body. That's their right. But what about the right to take another human being's life? When does it become okay to do that? Scripturally. An innocent baby. That's what abortion is. So I look at abortion from three perspectives. Biblically, which is most important, it's wrong in God's eyes. Case closed. Now, I could give you scripture for that, but I want to make sure I get through everything today. Scientifically, life begins at conception. Therefore, abortion is murder. Morally, killing a defenseless human being is absolute barbarism. No moral compass is needed for such an act. Now, it goes to Mike Pence. Mike Pence says, hey, I couldn't be more proud to serve as a vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. Mike Pence said, I don't apologize for it. And this is another one of those cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. Late-term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood of America. And for our part, I would never presume how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the Supreme Court of the United States, but we will continue to stand for the right to life. Now, was I thankful to hear that? Absolutely. Because that's a biblical stance. And you can dance all around that all you want to, but I mean, at the end of the day, how does God view all of this? And Romans chapter 1, when they knew God, they acknowledged Him not. They would not acknowledge the things of God. They did not like to retain God in their knowledge. And that's what we're wrestling with here in America. You can say you're a Christian, but you support abortion? How does that work? How can you try to juggle those balls and say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, but I'm pro-abortion, which is anti-Bible? She made it a point to say Joe Biden would be a Catholic president should he be elected. But he's pro-abortion. How? That does not compute. I just read to you off of that Catholic website that the Catholic Church does not agree with abortion. But yet, they're saying Joe Biden would be a Catholic president, and he's proud of that fact, but he is pro-abortion. So that doesn't work for me. So, the abortion. It's a big topic. Supreme Court. Talked about the Supreme Court last night. And Mike Pence said, when you speak about the Supreme Court, though, he said, I think the American people really deserve an answer. And this will be very important. He said, Senator Harris, are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court? Now, you've heard a lot of talk about this, pack the court. Do you really understand the dynamics of what's going on behind the packing of the court? Mike Pence said, Senator Harris, are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed. He said, I mean, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years from the time of George Washington to Barack Obama. And he said, presidents have nominated in all 29 cases, but your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. That's the main point right there, if you don't get your way. If Amy Coney Barrett, if Ruth Bader Ginsburg was still alive, we wouldn't even be talking about this. And Joe Biden was elected, they say, hey, if we got a liberal court, we're still have a, we're still have the majority, and so we're not really worried about it. But he said, if you don't get your way, and Mike Pence went on to say, this is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules. Now you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden refused to answer the question during the debate between him and President Trump. Now he says, now you've refused to answer the question. And Joe Biden refused to answer the question the other night. So I think the American people would really like to know if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed at the Supreme Court, as the Supreme Court of the United States. Are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way? And she said something, and he comes back to Mike. And he said, no, I'd like for you to answer that question. She deflected. Mike Pence says, people are voting now. Like I said earlier on in today's program, there are well over 4 million people that have already voted. They're voting right now. And Mike Pence says, they'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination. And Mike Pence said, you once again gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer. He said, and he's pushing her. We want an answer. Mike Pence said, you know, the people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is that they are going to pack the Supreme Court if they somehow win this election. And he said, men and women, I've got to tell you, people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket come November and re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court. So here's the question that I will wrap the program up with and how it ties into Bible prophecy. Why do you think both Vice President Mike Pence in this debate and President Trump were pressing so hard for an answer on the court? It's really pretty easy to figure it out. It's all about control, control, control. If Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court, that will result in 5 conservative Supreme Court justices. Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, Alito, and Thomas versus 4 liberals. And I'm putting Roberts in with the liberals because that's pretty much what he is. 4 liberals, Roberts, Kagan, Breyer, and Sotomayor. So it all comes down to control. In the words of Mike Pence, if the liberals don't get their way on this nomination, that's very key. They will seek to add as many liberals to the court as needed to swing it back the other way. That's the reason for that they're pressing them. Are you going to pack the court? And Joe Biden said, look, regardless of what I decide on that, and he deflected. Senator Harris deflected. But both Biden and Harris are refusing to answer whether they will do this, which means that it's probably exactly what they will do. And in addition to this, again, I said it's all about control. In addition to this, Democrats are pushing statehood for the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. What would that do? That would add 4 liberal Senate seats. And so you say, well, why in the world? Why are they going to jump through all them hoops and do all that? Because when it all comes down to it, everybody, it's all about control, control, control. Early on in the debate, Vice President Mike Pence said that the Trump administration, is all about removing regulation, keeping our promises, removing regulation, and we've cut taxes, and we want to, in other words, if we, the government, takes our hands off the American people and let them run. We have confidence in the American people. If we take the government's hands off of it and just let the American people do what we do best and produce and let this economy go, unleash the lion, take the collar off and let the thing go, the economy will explode, because that's what we are good at. It's capitalism 101. But you can see with a Joe Biden, Kamala Harris ticket that it would be all about control, control, control. Because that's how you say, well, how do you know that? Well, if you talk about putting us back in the Paris Climate Agreement, that's all about control on American businesses, coal-fired power plants and all these different things. They want to put restrictions and control and all of that. They want it's all boils down to the Paris Climate Agreement, remember, was commitments by the nations to support the Sustainable Development Goals. They were both signed on to. The Sustainable Development Goals were signed on to by the nations of the world under the Obama administration in September of 2015. The Paris Climate Agreement, which was the Sustainable Development Goals, Ban Ki-moon, remember, he said that's the vision. The commitment by the nations was the Paris Climate Agreement. Joe Biden, Senator Kamala Harris, they both are pro putting us back in the Paris Climate Accord. President Trump pulled us out. President Trump is about less restriction. The Trump-Biden ticket is about more restriction, more governmental control. They want to be able to hold the reins of the Supreme Court. And so you've got to understand what's really going on, what really happened in last night's debate. If you really follow it and we analyze the debate, look at the debates going forward. Which one would you say is about control and which one is about less control, less restriction? Look how it's been over the last several decades and how it was over the last 3.5 years. And so it's critical that we look at these things, because the next president of the United States could serve at least 4 years, and all of the prophecy that's converging right now. We don't want to go off into world government, and we don't want to live in a country that is pro-abortion, pro-same-sex marriage. We want to get away from that because it's not biblical.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.